Hey, welcome back to Pappy Tinkers and part 3 of my weathering tutorial. Instead of making excuses as to why the long wait for part 3, let's just get into this one. Like many hoods, this one is scored underneath in case you want to cut the hood open for a scoop. On this wagon I want the hood stock and flat. And I can see that the lines of that scoring through the primer on the top of the hood. And if you can see it in the primer, you're going to see it in the paint. This is one of the reasons that I always prime the bodies, so I can see if I need to block sand those lines out. Any flat sanding stick will work to eliminate that line. Usually if I'm sanding primer or something that's been painted, I'll wet sand it. I like to think that it comes out smoother and makes less of a mess than dry sanding. Oh, and if you like this series or any of my other videos, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Might as well hit that bell too if you want to know when I upload, because while I try to have regular days, life usually gets in the way. Now, let's fix those spots on the chassis where we got rid of the molded in exhaust. The owner of this car is a young kid, maybe still in high school, so I'm going to make the repairs like he would. The patch in the spare tire well is done from underneath, because it's just too hard to try to beat it into shape from the inside with his claw hammer. Just add lots of that super seal stuff so that the smoke from his burnouts doesn't fill the inside of his car anymore. The other holes he'll fix from the inside because it's easier to take out the back seat than spending all day underneath the car in the driveway. Besides, he might find a few quarters back there. Plus there's all those french fries that got dropped over the years. This is also a chance to get creative. Perhaps the sheet metal came from the stop sign at the end of the street. You can patch a lot of holes from just one sign. Ask me how I know. When you think you're done, do a quick test fit of the interior tub to make sure it still fits right. Using the thin sheet plastic is great for these places where strength isn't needed. I'm going to try a new technique that I've seen in other videos. Applying the bare metal foil on some of the badging and emblems before painting, and then sanding or buffing through the paint to expose it later. Some of the emblems are very small and don't stand out very well. This seems like a great one to try it on. The cursive script plus all the individual letters, my eyes have a hard time seeing them. And have you ever tried to cut out an R? Plus, as the weathering is a layering process, each layer of paint makes those emblems less defined and harder to detail later on, even with the small Molotov pins. So let's find out together if this works. I won't bore you with the whole process of applying the foil, just show you the afterwards. As you might be able to see, some of the individuals are just squared off. I'm hoping that the layers of primer and paint will cover those little squares and just expose the letter later on. Back out to the paint booth. I apply another coat of the first main primer, mainly just to get everything the same color. I concentrate where there is bare plastic. This way everything starts out the same color, the same surface. It might not be as important on something like this since there's going to be multiple colors on top, but for me it's part of the overall process. Just one of the steps I follow to try to get the same results every single time. I would do this even if the plastic wasn't yellow. The spray gun I'm using is a small detail gun from Harbor Freight. It costs less than 20 bucks. I like spraying my primer through it because it'll handle the thicker materials and I don't have to worry about clogging up a good airbrush with gooey primer stuff. Now it's time to start with what will be the rusted or bare metal layer. I like to use Tamiya XF9 Hall Red. Their red-brown works pretty well too. Actually, any similar color will work. Color is just color no matter what the name. This is just a foundation color anyways. First I'll spray the obvious areas that have rust or other damage. I don't worry about staying right on the damage. I make sure to get that the rust color goes out a ways from that area. And then I'll hit the areas that have typical paint wear and fading and damage. Consider the story of your build. Is it 5 years old? 10? Older? This one will be about 20 years and typical of what some of my friends in high school were driving at the time. A car that would typically have places on the hood and roof where the paint had faded away. A car that old would typically have places on the hood and roof where the paint had faded away, even though it was fairly well taken care of and in good shape. The factory paint back then just didn't last that long unless it was always garaged. The tops of the doors and the fenders were also very prone to fading from the sun and oxidation. So those areas are going to get a coat too. On the chassis, I'll use this color to darken all the shadows and crevices and nooks and crannies. A nice rusty foundation. The same with the suspension parts, and any areas that you might see when you open the hood and so on. I'm not concerned about full coverage at this point, or even know how much I'll do to the bottom, but it's got some there and that's good enough for now. I'll put one more coat on the top surfaces, just to give it a little more for us to work with later on, to make sure that I don't sand through or there's not any gray showing on places where it's supposed to be just bare metal on the roof and fenders and the hood. I found this Freestyle brand paint last year. I can't remember where though. I've never heard it before, but it was on sale for $1 or $2. And I thought the blue was pretty and that I would find something to use it on, so here we go. Many of the grocery getter wagons from the 60s had the same color interior as the exterior, so I'll start spraying the interior parts. I'll add some different blues here and there on the inside just to give it a little bit more realism and character later on. But many of the pieces like the dashboard, the steering wheel, the door and cargo panels, they'll probably stay this same stage. Plus, by the time I'm done weathering the outside, the colors won't be exactly the same anymore. I have to say that so far, I like this paint. A good shaking and right into the airbrush. It sprays nice, good coverage, it's a nice color. Of course, the real test will be on the body, and it'll certainly go through the ringer after I do that. However, that's not going to be in this episode, as there are some other steps that need to be taken before I can spray it blue. I'm just trimming it in for right now. I hope you've been liking this series and learned a thing or two from it. If you did, remember to hit those like and subscribe buttons and leave me a comment. Thank y'all for dropping in, and I'll see you next time on Pappy Tinkers.